I'm JJ Alderman, and this is Jimmy Smith, and we're so thankful that you've come here today, and we get to talk and share some thoughts and kind of tell people what God is doing around the world. Let me tell you a little bit about my story. I moved to Togo when I was 6 years old. My parents are missionaries. My dad's a church planting bush pilot, and my mom is a nurse. And so I moved there as a young guy and lived there all the way through the end of my high school until I came back to the States. And I watched God do amazing things in my early life growing up. I look back and I watch my dad's story. My dad is a first-generation Christian and was sent to the mission field as one of those guys that packed up his container, moved to Africa with a family of 4 kids, and had never been out of the country himself. And so that's, when I look back and think a couple generations back, that's not at all the reality of what we live in today and the world that we're experiencing, especially when we're talking about building missions programs and onboarding full-time missionaries. I've had the privilege of listening to Ivan a couple weeks ago when we were in Togo, and he was continuing to cast vision of where we're going and what's going on in the future, and how we believe that we must have at least 300 new missionaries in just the next 8 years now. And so as we look at growing and expanding the reach of the gospel into other areas of the world, we have to ask the question, where are these missionaries coming from? And what does it look like to get them from where they are today to where they need to be in just a few years? So I have to think of our ministry in Togo. And the more and more that I get to see the U.S. ministry and at the same time live the majority of my life in West Africa, I'm seeing a lot more similarities than I see differences when it comes to ministry. I'm seeing more and more that our American churches have to operate more like the mission field than they ever have. We can't continue to do status quo ministry in the same way that we did before. It did work yesterday, but it doesn't necessarily work today. And so as we look forward to what's going to happen, that means we might need to recalibrate or realign like we heard about this morning and make some differences and some adjustments to be able to hit that goal so that we can continue to project the gospel to those unreached people groups. I think about our first church plant in Aniho, where every single one of our church members has become a believer in the last 8 years. Out of that church plant, we now have 2 pastors that have come out of there and have planted, or one has planted and one plants in about 30 days. He'll have a launch. And then they also have house churches that are going in the area. So that pastor is also leading those guys as well. So we do have to understand, I live in the 11th poorest nation of the world. And so because of that, you have to understand the development of society and the way in a room this broad where our contexts are from left to right, and we understand that. And so what we're going to try to do today is bring this back to some principles that we're able to use and some pieces that we're able to use to assist us to go farther together. So as I look at this church, each one of these pastors that have come out of this first church plant have become believers in the last 7 or 8 years, which means they have very little biblical understanding. We have to disciple them and help them to lead themselves at home before they can start leading a group as well. And from there, launch them out to be able to do the exact same thing. This church that's almost a year old now, Pastor Ben, who's pastoring that church, and I made mention of a couple people in the baptism picture last night. When I look around and he and I are having a conversation, I think we have 5 future pastors coming out of that church. 2 probably as brick and mortar, and 3 of them as house church pastors. Just looking at them on their socioeconomical level, on their educational level, and where they fit in and have influence in society. And so the question we're asking right now is, how do we get these new believers that have walked with Jesus for less than 6 months, how do we get them to grow, to be able to release them to multiply as well? My dad always tells me, I'm going to be able to know if I'm a successful dad when I see how you raise your kids. And so what we're watching for is generational growth and generational multiplication when it comes to planting and expansion. And so my dream is for us to be able to walk into a church and someone say, hey, who's that guy? Because we've been dreaming and begging God for something amazing to happen, a movement among people groups, and yet they've reproduced a couple generations, and they have no clue who Pastor Jonas is, who discipled Pastor Ben, who launched out someone else, who launched out someone else. They couldn't trace it back to the very beginning of where it starts. And so I have to bring that back to us as a movement, to Converge, to 1,400 or so churches right now, and say, what's next for us? How do we reach this next mark of 300 new missionaries in the next 8 years? And I have to come back and say, it has to be from us, from our movement. We're the very ones that produce that. When I went to college about a decade or so ago, I used to think that colleges produced great missionaries and great pastors. It didn't take me very long to figure out it's great churches that produce great missionaries and great pastors. And so we have to come back to the very beginning of the process, and yet at the same time, look into the future and say, 5 years out, 10 years out, we're asking God that he will give us, like he tells us to pray for the laborers, for the harvest field, that God will give us the right people that we can equip and send out to be able to do so. And so I'm very excited about a goal of 300 new missionaries. And I'm also pretty confident that we can do that a whole lot faster than the next 8 years. With our 1,400 churches within our movement, I believe that we can, and I believe that we should. So what we're going to be talking about in the next couple minutes, and Jimmy especially, is going to lay out some helping points and an opportunity for people to come alongside our Converge churches as a movement to make sure that we're more efficient and we're able to help people move forward in this pipeline and in this process. And so while this is a breakout session, this is also kind of a dreaming session. This is the point for us to be able to say, God, how many can you give me? How many people can I pour my life into and send them out to go somewhere else around the world? Because I only have one life. And so when I see these other missionaries, if I had another or 100, I'd definitely give a couple where they serve too. But I only have one, and this is where God sent me. Just like each one of your stories and where God sent you right now. And so asking God over the next 75 or so minutes, say, God, what does the next 10 years of ministry look like so that we can have a reach somewhere else in another people group somewhere else around the world? So let me turn it over to Jimmy, and we'll have him start sharing a little bit of the details on how we're able to apply some of these principles.
Want to pass some of those out?
Sure.
All right. Well, welcome. My name is Jimmy Smith, and I'm based in Denver, Colorado. And just a little bit about myself. I started working in a Converge church 10 years ago in 2008, and quickly fell in love with Converge people, Converge church planting, Converge missions, and just always been a group of people that I love to serve and be a part of. And what I'd been doing in the church before that, and then up to that time, was I'd been doing a lot of administrative work in the church to support my missions habit. Because that's what I really like to do, but the administrative work paid the bills, right? So that's how I got a paycheck, and you know, you got to be part of a significant kind of church that can afford to hire a missions pastor. And anyway, lots of subsequent events happened over the 10 years that I've been at Stapleton Church in Denver, Colorado. But a couple years ago, I stepped out of the ministry there. I'm still at that church. I love that place. My heart is there. My base is there. It's my sending church. But I stepped out into some missions opportunities that were in front of me, and I worked for an organization that did Muslim ministry for about a year and a half. And then Converge came knocking, and I was very compelled by the vision that the international ministries team had, especially through Ivan and Gary Hunter, and I really wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be a part of this 310 years. I wanted to be a part of using the things that God has gifted me with in the church and mobilizing people and getting people out of the pew and into the field and seeing people. We had a girl called out of our church that's serving in Estonia. Many of you know Beth Ann Erickson. It was such an amazing thing to watch and see and be a part of in my life and ministry. And so I was really captivated by the vision and captivated about how I could be a part of that. And so I just finished raising my support. Praise the Lord. Yeah, 95%. So if you're looking for a missionary, no, just kidding. I learned that from Dan. No, I'm super excited to be where I'm at. In August, we're really going to get going and jump full bore into this role. But my role is a church mobilization specialist. So I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve you. I want to help your churches do a better job at doing cross-cultural ministry in any way that I can. Some of you are doing a great job, and maybe you can help some others. Some of you, maybe you're at ground zero, and you're trying to figure out how to do this. Some of you pastors are going, I got enough going on in my church. How am I supposed to do it? Maybe it's a bandwidth issue. Maybe there's just not enough people and resources to go around. You're trying to think about, how can I do this? This is where Converge as an organization wants to come alongside you and serve you. I'm a fully support-based missionary. I don't want anything from you. Okay? I want to come into your church and I want to serve. I don't need a love offering. I don't need an honorarium. I want to come serve you in any way that I can, help shepherd people in your church, help talk strategy, help talk vision, help give resources, ways that I can help you find this vision in your church, and help see missionaries called out of your church to go serve the Great Commission somewhere else. And I'm excited about that role, and so that's a little bit about me, and I hope I'm not giving away too much of the message here, but this right here, this document, I want to go over real quick first. JJ's laid out the vision. I want to give you tools, okay? I want to show you some of the things that are in our toolbox, some of the ways that we can serve you, maybe wet your whistle a little bit so that you have some things to take back and start working on, processing with your team, processing with your leadership that might help you as you move down this journey together with us as Converge. When I first had the question asked to, or told to me, we're going to try to have 300 missionaries in the next 10 years. Well, the next logical question is, where are those missionaries going to come from? Where are those missionaries going to come from? What do you think the logical answer is? Churches. Our churches! Do you know most of our missionaries were not coming out of our churches? They just weren't. There was not enough emphasis through the organization to breed that type of culture and structure. But it's a new day, and we're working on this. We want to see our churches be a missionary-sending force to get the gospel to the least reached peoples of the world. So, if our missionaries are going to come out of our churches, what if our churches aren't doing anything for missions? Should we expect a church that's not doing anything towards cross-cultural work, should we expect that missionaries are going to get called out of that? Well, God can do anything, of course. But you know probably as well as I do, most missionaries you know on the field served there at some point in their life. They went there on a short-term team. They experienced that culture here in the U.S. They served there in the military. Somehow they had engagement with that culture. And they saw God working in that culture. They saw themselves working in that culture. And they said, I wonder if God wants to use me here to help people find and follow Jesus. So if our churches aren't giving people opportunities to taste and see what God is doing around the world, why would we expect that people would be drawn to that vision and drawn to that passion? We want to help our churches do missions well, do cross-cultural ministry well, because out of that, I believe people will be called into service. I've heard Ivan say that there's thousands of people sitting in our churches and no one's calling them. I want to call them. I want you to call them. I want you to shepherd them. I want you to disciple them and help ready them for the field. So what that looks like initially, I think, for churches is really good and solid church missionary partnerships. Church missionary partnerships. That's the first document you have in your hand. Some of this might be rote, and some of this might be kind of basic for you. Maybe there's going to be one or two ideas that jump out of this towards you that you could implement. We've got to move beyond the day of just sending a check to our missionaries. Okay? I like getting checks. Okay? All of our missionaries like getting checks. That's a piece of the puzzle. We also like to know that there's people praying for us. We also like to know that there's support there when we need it. We also like to know that when we come back on furlough that there's going to be a church that wants to welcome us and see us. And we also want to know that churches want to come visit and serve alongside us. There's lots of pieces to a partnership puzzle. So with each and every missionary, there are some basics that I think each church needs to look at and see if you've got some of these basics involved in your program. Okay, so those of you that have a program, evaluate. So those of you that might be thinking about starting some stuff up, here's some good stuff to consider. Regular planned prayer for our partners and their work. Okay, 101. We're praying for our missionaries, all right? Educated people here, church people, we're not going to delve into that too much, but we're praying for our missionaries. Consistent, regular communications to our partners. When's the last time you emailed your missionaries? When's the last time you put a note in the mail for them? Okay? I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I got to battle this same thing, right? I was managing the missions at our church, and that weighed on me sometimes. Like, I haven't even talked to that guy in a year, you know? How are we communicating with them? Secret. They want to hear from you. Don't you like it when you get an email from a supporting church? Don't you? Dan, don't you like that when there's a little note that pops in that just says, I'm praying for you? Yeah, that's encouraging. That needs that. Sometimes they're going to get that at just the right time. you know? How are we doing consistent, regular communication? One way is to plan for it. Hope is not a strategy, right? What's the plan we have in place to help communicate with our missionaries? Financial resourcing of the missionary and their projects. Okay, monthly support is great. Guarantee you, every missionary you support or will support is going to have a project account because they got big vision for something. They need to build a school. They need to build a church. They need to buy a vehicle to get to remote places in the community because I got to get four-wheel drive to make that happen. There's some project that they need. Are you thinking about their projects? Are you putting aside resources to help with project funding as well? Short-term team sending and receiving. I'm old school. I'm still a big believer in short-term mission trips. I just am. I think they can be done poorly. You've probably seen them done poorly. But I think they can be done very, very well. One of my roles to help our churches know how to do short-term trips really well. How we support missionaries the very best way that we can through discipleship. For me, mission trips are bait and switch. I tell people you're going to go to Mexico, you're going to have a good time, you're going to eat lots of tacos, you're going to serve, you're going to play with kids. Dan and Melinda, they're a lot of fun. And you build it up because it's this great, wonderful thing that you experience. And then I get them on the team. And then it's all about discipleship. I don't take anybody out of the country without training. We walk people through multiple training meetings, teaching them how to share their testimony, practicing sharing their testimony, teaching them what they're going to experience in the culture, working as a team together. Before we ever step off the plane and into the field, we've got a team that knows what they're doing. And then on the field, that's the best part. You're praying for them, you're watching them, you're encouraging them, you're helping them process the things that they're working with. You're taking them through Scripture along the way. You're helping them engage in conversations with the missionary. Because eventually somebody's going to get called out of that. Somebody's going to get the bug. Somebody's going to see God working in them. They're going to see God working in that culture, and they're going to put the two together. You go, I think I could probably do that. And at the very least, they're going to come back as better servants in your church back home. So to me, mission trips are all about discipleship. So I'm big on short-term team sending and receiving. Genuine relationships. I have a pretty good relationship with all the missionaries that we support. Dan's in the room. Dan and I go back about 10 years now, and Dan's one of my favorite people in the world. Melinda, too. I see you over there. And I just love going and serving with them. They know that our church is a place where they have a relationship. Do your churches know, or your missionaries know, that when they come to your church that it's a place of relationship, it's a place of safety, it's a place of friendship, where they know faces that are there? How are you cultivating those genuine relationships? And then partner care. Are you able to stand in the gap at the times when they need significant help? Deaths in the family back in the States. Can you come alongside and serve them while they're making transition to get back? All those kinds of things that happen. How as a church can you step in with partner care? Are you planned for that? Are you ready for that? So those are things we want to consider with each and every missionary as an individual that we work with. But then the next kind of part of this, and this could probably be organized a little bit better, is what are we doing as a team in our church, okay? Some churches have a staff member that maybe oversee the mission stuff. Some people may have a volunteer. But I encourage you to have a team. I really appreciate your proverb, to go quickly, we go alone. To go far, we go together, okay? You're going to have a much broader impact. You're going to have a much broader reach in your church when you build a team around this. So what does a missions ministry team look like? Well, first of all, having a team. 2, strategic missions budgeting. That team needs to be talking with the powers that be, whoever's controlling the purse strings in the church, to make sure they've got some influence in there, right? And that they're part of those conversations, that you're strategically budgeting for your missions. Here's a quick little tip, maybe something you want to do. Don't budget every dollar and commit it at budget time. Leave a few $1,000s in there for the missionary that comes in 3 months before your budget's up and needs some support then, so you don't have to wait 15 months to get that guy on. That's strategic missions budgeting. We're planning that God's going to bring someone else to us. We don't know who it is yet, but we're planning that. Or go find a missionary and say, hey, we'd like to support you. Wouldn't that be cool? Missionaries start getting phone calls. I don't know what to do with this. That's strategic budgeting. How are you putting those dollars into place for your missions work? Following partnership basics. Number 4, church-wide involvement, inclusion, and promotion. You want the people in your church to know who your missionaries are. What are you doing? How are you planning for this? Can you get 2-minute snippets to show every quarter, to highlight a missionary? What can you do to put things in people's hands so that they know what the prayer needs are? Yes, missionaries send out their prayer letters and emails. That doesn't always get down to the grassroots level, right? How can we take that stuff and put it in a different package to put in people's hands so that people see faces and they know what's going on. They know who we're supporting. So church-wide involvement, inclusion, promotion. When you do short-term trips, it's a great time to do church-wide inclusion. Okay, how do you do that? Well, for instance, we're going to Mexico. I keep bringing up Dan. He's sitting over here. We're going to Mexico in a few weeks. Instead of budgeting to buy vitamins, I said, hey, how about we have people in our church donate vitamins that we can take down with us, right? Something that's simple. So everybody's now in the church is involved in the mission trip because they're bringing vitamins, and we'll make a little video when we give out vitamins that day, and we'll send it back to the church. So the people in the church that didn't get to go had a part. You can help them by, they're supporting people that are going on the trips. There's lots of ways through prayer, inclusion, ways that you can bring everyone together around short-term emphasis. Okay, 6, local and international focuses. Scott hit on this today a little bit about local focuses. One of the things I envision for our Converge churches is not only that every church would be involved in cross-cultural overseas type missions, but you've got at least one project, one ministry, one cross-cultural opportunity that you're working on right in your own backyard. Okay? We live in a different day than we did 20, 25 years ago. Okay? The nations have come to us. Back when I was in college, long time ago, there was this thing called the 1040 window, right? And you weren't a real missionary unless you were going to the 1040 window. If you were going to Mexico, you were just kind of a B-level missionary. But, the real ones, they were going into the 1040 window and the hard parts. And over the last 20 years, what has God done in the 1040 window? One of the most spectacular things is he's brought them to us. All this craziness going on in the world, it's God's fingerprints all over it. There's some horrific things, obviously, that we don't like seeing happening in our world. But even those things, God is using for his glory to move people out of countries that they would have never, ever had the opportunity to hear about Jesus. And all of a sudden they find themselves in the U.S., in Australia, in Europe, somewhere where there's freedom to see the gospel. I worked in Muslim ministry with Horizons International for about 18 months. And they would find people that had come to the U.S. and that were from Islamic backgrounds. And all of a sudden they would say, oh, now I'm a Christian. And it wasn't because they'd made some conversion to Christ. It's that I live in a Christian country, so now I'm a Christian. And this is way better than what I dealt with, back in Saudi. So why not? And so a lot of times you'd have those conversations. Well, let me tell you what a real relationship with Jesus is about. But I'm telling you, Christianity is very attractive to people who've been under bondage their entire life. And so God has brought people out of those nations to us. And I'll guarantee every one of you do 5 minutes of research on Google, you will find very large demographics around your major cities, around the places where you live, that you can engage in cross-cultural ministry right where you're at 365 days a year, not just in a 2-week mission trip over the summer. You got to find it. You got to go after it. And those people will oftentimes be the ones that get called to go back to their people and do a lot better job sharing the gospel because it's their people, it's their language, it's their heart. And we can find them right here in the States. What are you doing as a church for local cross-cultural involvement? I'm spending way more than 10 minutes on this document. All right, so local and international focuses. 2, emphasis to send interns and career missionaries from your church to join missionary teams. I've got to know JJ a little bit. The guy's blowing me away with the pipeline that he is creating inside of churches to send missionaries to him. Okay? How many are in the pipeline right now? About 20? About 20. Yeah, just a few. But that's because he's out there slinging it. He's making it happen. He's getting out there working with churches, finding people that know missionaries and know these young people that are coming up, looking for those opportunities and building those pipelines to send them. Our churches need to be that pipeline for our missions projects and for our missionaries that are already serving. If you've got to work, let's say, we've got a missionary contact in Estonia with Crick and Mindy Poyer. And we started sending teams over there. And now we've got a girl out of our church that's serving in Estonia, right? I would love to see that happen all over our churches, that the places we're already working, we try to send our best and brightest to go along and assist. And that we're discipling our young people, that we're discipling the adults in our church, the young people in our church, to see how they could go serve in some of these places. How are you creating that pipeline for career missionaries and interns to come out of your church and join what God is doing cross-culturally? Annual emphasis, have a time every year where you can celebrate these things. Number 9, evaluate potential partnerships and assess ongoing partnerships. Okay? So if you're in the room today and you've already got some things going on, again, we've talked about this word recalibrate. Might be time to just evaluate, look at some things, clarify the vision. What are we focusing on? Where do we need to add? Where do we need to subtract? Where do we need to stop doing things that aren't working? And where do we need to start emphasizing things that are working? How are we working with Converge? I'm telling you, it's sad. I see so many Converge churches that don't support a single Converge missionary. I'm not trying to be guilt-driven here. We haven't done a good job from the top of making this happen as well. But we want to see the primary driver for Converge missionaries be Converge churches, right? Doesn't this make sense? We can do this. God has given us a strong organization with lots of great churches. This is something we can do. Number 10, strategic missions exposure to youth and young adults. How are we communicating this vision to our teenagers, to our young adults? Are we being strategic about that? Are we making a plan? Again, hope is not a strategy. I took my very first mission trip as a junior in high school. I went to Monterrey, Mexico. We worked with a lady that was working with a deaf church down there. I talked to my youth pastor the other day. I said, I blame you for all of this. I said, you're the one that got all this started. My home church was a little church of 200 people in little Collinsville, Oklahoma. Our little church of 200 people supported 100 missionaries. I grew up in a missions culture because those people, and they were just salt of the earth people. These were farmers, ranchers. There weren't any heavy hitters in this church that just loved Jesus, loved missions, and they gave. They took a faith promise offering. Who's heard of a faith promise offering before, right? And so it was an annual offering they'd take every year, and all those dollars, $100,000 would go out the door of this little church to go support 100 missionaries around the world. And so I saw missionaries all the time. And then I went on a missions trip, and my heart got... my heart was grabbed. And I can see that happening in our churches. The more we emphasize this, the more we get behind it, the more young people see leaders passionate about this stuff. Okay? People are looking at you. Listen, leaders, I've said this in negative context and positive context. Your words weigh 1,000 pounds. When you're the leader of your church, an organization, your family, whatever, your words weigh 1,000 pounds. They have way more emphasis than other people that aren't in leadership. So the things you emphasize, positively and negatively, have so much weight. Let's use that to our advantage. Okay, so strategic mission exposures to youth and young adults. Partner care. How do we take care of our partners? I'm just going to blow through this list real quick. Special date communication, birthdays, anniversaries. Are we remembering those things? Specific families assigned to each partner. That's a great idea. Find a group of families that can be this missionary partner's support group. Holiday blessings. We're thinking of them around the holiday time. Stateside assistance while on furlough, vacation. Do you have a family that can loan them a vehicle or a place to stay when they're in town? Can you take their kids to Disneyland when they show up in your town? What can you do to help bless your missionaries while they're on furlough? Urgent need backing. Do your missionaries know that they can call you at a moment's notice and say, we just threw an axle and we can't get to where we need to go. We need $2,000 to replace the axle. Can you help? You have those kind of things ready to go. Strategic prayer, caring for MKs. Sometimes the forgotten ones, right? How are we helping our missionaries with that stuff? Are there ways that we can invest in those families to help them with their missionary kids and the development that they have? All kinds of unique needs for missionary kids, right? And we want to help bless in those areas as well. Okay, expectations of missionary partners. I'm not wanting to be too rigid about this, but there should be expectations that we have when we're partnering with someone. Regular communication. We want to make sure we're partnering with someone who knows how to communicate with us. And special urgent need communication, that they know they can do that they're willing to visit when they're stateside, so come report, build that relationship, come recruit from our church, as you share, tell people that you're looking for people, willingness to host teams, short-term teams when appropriate, congruency of vision, theology and practice, some of the basics, and a common desire to invest in the relationship with the church, okay? You want a missionary that's coming to build a relationship, not just get a paycheck, okay? And don't fault them for coming in and wanting a paycheck, okay? That's a big piece of the puzzle. But that there is that desire for ongoing partnership and relationship, helping create a pipeline to what they're doing overseas. Any questions on this document real quick? JJ, something to add, please.
Yeah. If we can jump in and hover, I think that was point 7 or 8. We were talking about short-term teams and getting them into the pipeline. Because what we're seeing is there's a large disconnect between someone who is a junior in high school or a senior in high school who says, I'm really considering spending a portion of my life abroad. If we look at these millennials, they're not ready to commit 30 or 40 years and say, I'm going to do an entire career. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. We're okay with that. They're going to do the same thing in the American workforce if they're going to work in a job. And so to take a portion or a season of their life We need to thank them, applaud them, and help them to be able to do so. And so what we look at, I think the big word that I'm going to come back, or that I'm going to take away from what I just heard, is the word intentionality. If we're intentional about all that we do, I tell our young guys in Togo, we're okay if we're wrong on something, if at least we knew why we did it and we made the best possible decision we could at that point with the information we had. And so as long as we're intentional in helping young people and people transition throughout all stages of life to be able to spend a season abroad, let's make sure that we have a couple steps for them and that they don't get lost in the shuffle along the way. That's probably one of the easiest ways to lose them. And so we love having short-term teams that come to our house or come to see the ministry. I say to our house because we have a guest house right beside our house. The reason we do that, people could stay in hotels, that we have to understand our context. Our context is not the same as everyone else's, so we just have to be true to where we are. We have a guest house beside our house. Melissa does all the cooking there for the team, and we live life together. The reason why we live life together is so they can see what our life looks like and say, maybe I could do that too. That's the question we want them to ask. God, can I have my part in this too? What would it look like if I had my piece in this puzzle somewhere, somehow? From that short-term trip, which is normally about 10 days, it's just different with every single person, the next thing we're going to do is start asking people, especially with young people, would you be willing to come back and do an internship with us? With about 35 days, you can normally show and share enough of what life and ministry looks like to where they're ready to make a very educated decision on if they want to pursue that, and maybe is it even somewhere in that region of the world. Some people have an affinity somewhere else. God's calling them, leading them somewhere else. That's awesome. They're coming, they shared part of their story with us, and they move on and they're released to succeed somewhere else. And that's a huge, huge win for us. Think of Andrew on the front row who came in as an internship last year, but at that point did not have a college future or track decided for him. And so it was in that 35 days that God kind of used that time to redirect a little bit, and he's now in college and pursuing full-time ministry. And so the reason why it's so important that we have intentionality in all that we do is that as we help people move from step to step, just a couple of those from a short-term trip to probably some sort of internship, getting them prepared and onboarding, we're going to see that they're going to stay connected throughout the entire time. Look at our young generation. They're connected at all times, all right, through one way or another all around the world. That's what they want to continue to do. I think of you just because you brought it up to me yesterday. You said, hey, did you call me from Togo last week? No, it wasn't me. It had to have been somebody else from last summer that you met. I still don't know who it was, but someone somehow stayed connected. And that's what young people are looking for. That's what our future missionaries are looking for, is to stay connected and intentional. And if we are intentional, as we go through saying, how do we build a partnership between our churches and our missionaries? There's one thing that I'm experiencing and we're experiencing, and I'm standing in front of a group of people who love God and love ministry. If we love people, it's not as hard to remember to reach out to them, to care for them, to love, to bless them. What we have to do is love people that we connect with. Love people in our partnerships. Partner with missionaries, or for missionaries, partner with churches where we connect at more than just a surface level, but at an intentionality, at a, yes, we believe this is what God is leading us and sending us towards in the future. And then we do have to come back around with these tools and remember to make sure, because we do all lead busy lives. But let's continue to work to be intentional, which is something we're striving to do as we invite people. Don't be scared to walk up to somebody and say, you'd be a really good missionary. Just tell them, you'd be a really good missionary. Sometimes God will use that little phrase to start working in their life. Say, wow, my pastor, somebody in my church told me that I'd be really good at something. I could really use that. It's amazing when I look back to the mission, when I talk to missionaries today and I look back in their past and I hear their stories, many times they had someone tell them something like that. And then they had people that helped them and coached them along the way. We all should be sending missionaries. And the reason why we're talking about it today is because that's our job on the other side of the world too. And we're attempting to do the exact same thing. And so let's continue to fight and work for that. So intentionality is what I took from that point number 8.
Great, brother.
You ask for questions.
Any other questions on that document? Sir.
Well, two questions. One for JJ and one for you. JJ, I'm a young lady at church that I know she's trying to go to Africa. And I think she'd be really interested in an internship, possibly with your organization. How would I go about connecting her?
Awesome. We have some brochures right up here to the right. Send me an email. For us, we take applications all the way until October 1st. We start giving our yeses there, so they have about 8 months or so to plan and prepare for that. It's not just about someone and the missionary, but for us, it's a partnership with the church. And so I rely very heavily on our pastors or whoever's leading missions in that department to say, what do you think? And how can we make sure that they're best prepared? That they know how to share the gospel. They're going to be reading between 6 and 8 books before they come. And that's kind of a non-negotiable for us to make sure that they're prepared and able to do that and growing and ready. And if the church has poured into them like we're asking and we have a partnership together, when they get to the field, God really works and leads in their lives. And so I'd love to have that conversation at the end. That'd be great. That'd be great.
You had another one?
But yeah, for you, we're really in a good place for recalibration. And you mentioned that you would either come or...
It's coming up next.
That's coming up next.
It's coming up right now.
All right.
On the docket. One more? About that document? Sir.
Did you say it's 35 days? You have them come?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, we'll have more time for questions at the end. We'll go ahead and keep moving here so we get through all this. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, my role is to come alongside and help our churches. All right, what does that look like? How can I serve you? What are some different ways that I can do that, okay? And it might be me. We've got lots of other people in the organization that might come alongside you as well. But right now, this is what I'm looking forward to doing with most of my life at this point. All right, how can we help your church? One, coaching. Coaching to help, and this is probably hard to read, so I'll go ahead and read everything off here. Coaching to help your church determine its calling and focus for cross-cultural missions involvement. Okay, so this could be at either of those levels where you might have a really good thing going already, or maybe you're starting from the ground up. We have some tools in our toolbox, we're calling it, where we can help come alongside your church and help you determine what that focus is. Kevin McGee, who's the director of U.S. engagement, has a great contact with another lady that we're partnering with that has some of these really great tools to bring into your church. So this could be something that might take some weeks, some time together as we process those kind of things together. Maybe there's pieces of that we can bring to play for you. But we are willing, we are ready, we are able to come alongside your church and coach you up in these areas. And I said earlier, sometimes the missions thing can get lost because of a bandwidth issue. Lead pastor, if you're overwhelmed, that's okay. We're here to come alongside, take this off your plate for you. Not subvert you. we want to join with your vision of helping people grow in your church and serve. So we're not going to subvert that, but we can come help take a little bit of this off your plate. You give us the right people and the right volunteers, and we'll take it from there and work with them and teach them how to work well with you inside your church to make these things happen. And so if that's one of those things that's like, man, I just can't do this because of bandwidth, we want to take away that, I don't know if I'll call it an excuse, but we want to take that away and help you and serve you in that. So coaching, how do we come alongside and help your church determine what that focus is? Where are your natural relationships? Where are you already supporting missionaries? Where are people in your church passionate about? Where are some of those things at already? Working with the leadership in your church, maybe the leadership of your missions team, figuring out what that calling and purpose is for your church and put that in play for the years to come. Okay? Number 2, personal guidance and assistance to individuals in your church considering missionary work as a career, an internship, or anything in between. Okay? As I'm working with churches, if any of those people pop up and I'm able to talk with them, I pretty quickly hand them over to our mobilization department. Got some great people in there. Some of you know Roger Peterson. There's a new guy named Jeff Lowry. Jessica Pence is in there. We've got all kinds of people that know what to do and know how to help have those conversations to walk people in this path. What are your questions? What is this going to look like? What is this going to cost? What's the time frame? How do I know I'm ready? We've got the Missionary Assessment Center, the MAC assessment that people come into. How long is the MAC? Is it about a week? 4 days? Come in. So we've got lots of great programming for that. But we want to help give that personal guidance along the way. Okay? So as lead pastor or leader in your church, if someone pops up their head and says, I'm interested in missions, I want you to pray with them. I want you to encourage them. And then maybe think about transitioning over to someone that can help move them along further. Again, not to subvert you, but to serve you in a way that we can work on this together and partner together as sending church and home church and missionary going out. Okay? Personal guidance and assistance in helping people considering that. Assistance in connecting churches with similar cross-cultural focuses to expand impact and influence. The word we're using for this is consortiums or consortia, however you want to do the plural of that. But consortiums. So Kevin gives this great example of a church in San Diego that's working in Myanmar and a church on the East Coast that's working in Myanmar, and they've never talked to each other about the work they're both doing in Myanmar. Okay? And then in that process, he discovered 3 other churches, Converge churches, that are also productive in Myanmar. So we want to be able to take this national look and bring together people that are working in common areas to pool together our resources. And I know it's cliche, but we're better together, right? Putting our resources together, putting our thoughts together, bringing our people together. Maybe you're going in June to take a team and they're going in November. Well, you got people that might not be able to make your trip but could make their trip. You know, there's all kinds of ways we can partner together in the things we're trying to make happen in these countries. Partner together on resourcing, special projects that the missionaries might need. Coming alongside to help just support financially those missionaries. So we want to build those consortia. So we want to find out where Converge churches are actually investing their missions dollars and investing their missions resources and where they have focus and help bring together those things through consortiums of areas that have similar focus. Next, connecting churches regionally for the purpose of prayer, cooperation, encouragement, and strength in fulfilling cross-cultural endeavors. So a brainchild that Ivan had a few years ago was this idea of the Champion Church Network. Okay, and champion churches would be churches in a regional area that are already doing a pretty good job with missions and kind of have things under control. We want to use those churches to build cohorts of churches regionally around them that can gather together to pray together, to plan together, equip together, put our strengths together so that we can serve together. I tell you, one of the things that's not happening right now is the conversation. If you don't have the conversation, you're never going to have action steps. You're never going to move to that next level if the conversation isn't even happening. The Champion Church Network is a way to get churches together to have the conversation and pray together, find each other's hearts, encourage, keep each other accountable with what we're doing cross-culturally. I know it might sound simple that we're just gathering, but again, if the conversation never starts, it's never going to go anywhere. So we want to get together, build these relationships, build these partnerships so that we can be more effective as an organization and as individual churches on what we're doing with our missions initiatives and work. And lastly, training. JJ, I'll have you hand this one out. I am not going to go over this document. It's simply a sample. I want to give you just an idea, something you can take back with you of some of the types of training that we might be able to bring into your church. And this is just one example of a lesson that we could cover with your team or with your church. But training, we want to cover as many areas of need around the issues of church missions ministry, short-term teams, support development, creating a missions culture, etc. However we can come in and serve your church. You might say, we just don't do short-term teams because we just don't have the funding for it. We can never raise the support. Okay? I've done 26 plus mission trips in my life. I've never had someone not be able to go on a trip because they couldn't raise the money. If they follow what I ask them to do, never had a person not be able to go because they couldn't raise the support. Okay? So that excuse is no good to me. All right? And it's not because I'm such a whiz. I've got some tools that I can help share with you to help make that a reality in your church. And not just me, but others in our organization. We've got ways to help train and coach things in your church that are hurdles for you that you might need to get over. Maybe it's just coming alongside your newly formed mission team, and we talk about what partnership looks like. And we ask questions, and we interact together, and we build that relationship with one another, organization to church, leaders to churches, to help find the things that you need to move to the next level with what you have. And again, it's just like marriage counseling. Just because you go to marriage counseling doesn't mean you have a terrible marriage. Okay? Just because you need some coaching missions doesn't mean you're a bad church, right? It's just we want to help you. We want to serve. And if we can help move forward with you in this together, that's what we're here for. That's what we're called to do. And so if you look at this document that's going around, this one just says short-term missions, goals of the church for short-term mission teams. So this document becomes important to me because we don't just want to send teams. We want to send effective teams that are able to share the gospel, that are discipling the people that are on those trips, helping maybe put them in a pipeline for internships or career missionary service. So if we set up our trips right, if we train them right, if we have the right things in place, we're not going to come home where people just felt like they had a glorified vacation, right? And listen, I'm the first one to tell you that mission trips are a blast. I love it, right? But what I really love is seeing lives changed and people's hearts moved toward Jesus. And so this is the kind of stuff that we can come alongside and work with your leadership or even with your teams of what we're trying to create. And there's countless topics we could cover. If I don't have it written up already, I'll write one for you, right? So whatever you need help with in coaching, it's available to you. You just have to ask. We want to be there to serve in any way that we can in the area of training. Okay. So let me go to the next slide. So next steps. So today, as we wrap up, we'll go through some next steps here, and then we'll have some more time for Q&A. And JJ, you could go ahead and hand out these if you wouldn't mind, buddy. So we got a little response card coming around, but let me kind of cover what we're talking about here today. So today, as you're processing all this, I know you're getting a lot of stuff this week at conference, and conferences are great for that. And it's going to take you a while, and a week later, you're going to find your notes, and you're going to think what you might want to work on, in the coming weeks and months. But number one, begin engaging in true church missionary partnerships. Start to reevaluate just from the basic level how we're working with our partnerships with our missionaries. You might surprise your missionary by sending them an email. I'm praying for you this week, and you know what? One thing I'm really praying for is that we can be a better job at being a partner with you. So just start with that. What are we doing currently that we can improve on when it comes to these areas of church missionary partnerships? You've got some tools in front of you, some things to already start thinking about. 2, evaluate your current missions, objectives, and vision. Determine areas of realignment. You can start that as a team. Again, we've got those tools to start helping you with that right now as well. And there's a way to respond on this card. You can give us your information. We can follow up with you on that. So 1, partnerships, evaluate your current status, where things are, realign your vision. 2, request training from Converge International Ministries. Short-term help, partnership development, discovering your focus. We want to help. Right there on the thing, it says interested in. Okay? Church missions cohort gatherings. Okay, that would be next. Gather with the Converge IM regional missions cohort. We'll help put you in place with the people that are in your area. We already know who those folks are, tentatively. There's some good plans in place for that. We know how to make those connections. We want to help you do that. That second one, interested in missions ministry training assistance. It doesn't even matter what it is at this point. Just mark it. We'll follow up. We'll figure out what that is. Third one, I know individuals considering a call to missions. Friend in the back. If you know some people like that in your church, you're not sure quite what to do with them, or you want to help move them forward, we'd love to have a chance to talk to them. We would love our churches, and we're unashamed about this, for our converged churches to think converged first when it comes to missionary work. We believe that. We're not the only organization out there reaching the world. There are lots of great people serving around the world to reach Jesus, and I'm great with that. I'll work with non-converged churches that want training. I don't care. I'm just trying to get people on the field, right? But would you give Converge a chance? Let us have a chance to talk with those folks in your church that are considering missions work. And then this is just kind of the catch-all. You just want to talk in the coming weeks about missions. When I get back from Estonia and Mexico, I'll be on the phone following up with folks. And if you'd like to just have a conversation in the coming weeks, we'll get that scheduled. We can talk more about your personal situation, what it is that you need. It's kind of like I'm your personal shopper, right? You tell me what you need, we'll figure out how to make it happen and work with you in this area of coaching and getting things set up in your church to move forward in the next several years to get those 300 people on the field and do a much better job at our initiatives and work. Okay, so the document that we handed out a minute ago that we didn't quite hit is just a resource doc, the one that says Converge IM Resources and Information. Not every leader is on here, or not every individual, but most of them are. First of all, we've got our, actually, I'm going to do this backwards. Go to page 2 of that document, the backside first. This is contact information for lots of people in the organization, okay? Yes, we want to talk to you, even so much that we're giving you Ivan's email address. I did that without his permission, but I did it anyway. If you know one email address, you know everybody's, because it's Jimmy S. Is yours JJA? No, yeah. So, hey. So those are all those different pieces of contact communication stuff. Maybe there's something specific you want to know on that. On the front, I've helped list our global initiatives. How many of you before this conference really were unaware of our global initiatives? A few of you? Yeah. We've got some things going on. There's some cool stuff happening out there. And I haven't detailed all the information about that, But in Africa, we've got the one that JJ is working with called the 6 Degree. You can scratch off the S there. 6 Degree Initiative, Full Bay Initiative, Wall-Off Initiative. In the stateside stuff, we've got diaspora things happening in Twin Cities, Portland and Seattle. Dan down in Latin America, some strong projects going with Latin American church strengthening. Bajío Initiative. Is that the one we're going to work on in the spring, hopefully? Is that the one we're talking about doing in the spring as a vision trip? So I'm working with Dan on a vision trip. That's another thing I didn't mention. I'd love to connect regional groups of pastors and help lead you guys on vision trips to some of our initiatives. Okay? I'm going to tell you it's going to be a lot of fun, but what am I trying to do? Trying to move you forward, trying to capture your heart so that you come back and be the leader for that in your church. Pass that down. If you go and taste and see, I promise you'll come back different. So Southern Cone Initiative, Jonathan Matthews, those guys down in, he just got done with a backpacking trip where they went to work with the Quechua people up in the Andes, and it was like a 5-night backpacking trip where they carried all their gear and went around.
They had 10 days.
They had to carry something. Come on, help me out here.
They started 9,000 feet, go to 14.
Yeah, and they show the Jesus film and some other crazy stuff, and they just do it all backpacking. It's cool stuff. In Asia, Thai Buddhist Initiative, Japan Initiative, Spice Islands, Europe, Middle East, Poland. What's CPM? Church planting. Nordic Baltic. Oh, I love that one. I'll be there in 2 weeks. Great Sea Initiative. Mr. Jeff, right there. If you want to talk about stuff around the Mediterranean, he's your man. So those are some of the people and the contacts and things that Converge is working on. As you start to think about your focuses and your vision, refer to this document. Maybe there's some alignment with what you're already doing, with what we're doing as well, and we can get together and be better together. All right. So on that response card, if you want to fill that out for us, we'd love to have that. I know you hate filling out response cards. I'm not going to put you on some spam email list. But if you'd like to give us some information, ways that we can get contact with you, and even if there's nothing you need contact about, there's a quick little survey. That will help us out. We're trying to figure some things out, get some data points that will help us do our job better. My church currently has a missions focus. My church has a paid staff person. My church has a volunteer person. How many partnerships do you have? How many of those are Converge partnerships? Number of cross-cultural short-term teams that you've sent from your church in the past 3 years. If you've got a specific focus, what is that? That will help us maybe help you partner with somebody that's on the other side of the U.S. that might be working in the same area that you are. And then also, I like this question. What's the greatest difficult? What's the thing that's holding you back? What's the hurdle that is the strongest in your church right now that we could help you get over? I'll bet likely we've got some tools to help you along that path in that sense. JJ, closing thoughts before we do some Q&A?
No, let's go straight to some questions,
What you got?
if they have any.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit more about what is the church missions cohort again?
Yes, ma'am. So that's that champion church network. So around each champion church, we'll build a cohort, is the word we're using, of churches around there. So there might be 8 to 12 churches regionally around a cohort that, they're within an hour or two of each other, so they can get together, break bread together, pray together, have some meetings. We're encouraging those groups to meet at least 3 times a year. Potentially more, but getting together at least 3 times a year to get together, talk shop, and see what each other's doing, build that relationship so you know that you've got some friends in other churches, and you might find out a lot of things about work. And, another thing that's great about those cohorts is you can talk with other people that might have experience in an area that you don't have. Right? We've never taken a team to Togo. What's that like? And these folks have. And so if we're gathering together and having those conversations and then figuring out ways we might be able to tackle some of these things together. JJ needs a new vehicle. It's $30,000. We can't do all of it. You guys do half. We'll do half. Where that, those kind of conversations can happen if we're getting together to meet. So that's what the cohort thing is.
Kind of to balance off the initiative, the other side that we're looking to build, and this is kind of a new idea that has not been fully developed yet, is the consortium. And so as we have partnered churches that are really spread all throughout the U.S., we have expertise from multiple areas. And so we're also looking more than just to be geographically aligned, but also to be missionally aligned. And so that's something we're asking our churches to come together, whether it be through one time a year conversation, if it needs to be face-to-face, or an ongoing through a virtual contact one way or another. Like for instance, I just had a contact from Washington State with the gentleman who says, I can find water for you. Well, one of our projects right now is Togo Palms, a camp, and we need water to be able to resource an entire camp. And so we're not talking about a shallow well. And he's saying, I can save you a whole lot of money by me coming over with my tool. And so now the next question is, do I have somebody else in another church that has expertise in actually drilling it to be able to do so? And so that's kind of the next step as we continue to be intentional with our missions program, and we have some alignment. While one church might have a few different focuses that they have, to be able to come together to that same table and exchange some thoughts. For us at times, a medical outreach is very, very helpful, but you don't always have 6 doctors in one church. And so it's much easier to be able to come back and share those thoughts and that vision together. And so that's something that we're looking at from the 6 Degree Initiative in the next 12 months to be able to build that with the right people to be able to help us and leverage influence to continue
Can I give
building.
a quick story just to bounce off of that? This morning, I met a guy that I went to China with 12 years ago to work on a water project in the middle of nowhere in Yunnan province, China. And it was a great story. The chief of the village came to Christ, all these things that happened in this project. The reason we teamed up with their church, we were down in Temecula, California. They were up in Big Bear, California. And we teamed up together because we both had a passion for China. And they had a guy in their church that knew a lot about finding water. And so they put a team together. We put our team together. We go together to serve. We helped in schools. And those things wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been in communication with each other. And our district at that time had a focus on China. And so we were having those conversations. So that stuff comes up. It's hard to see those things happen if we're not in those conversations. You get it? Anyway, it was cool to see that guy again today, too. I hadn't seen him in 12 years. Another question. We'll start asking you if we have to. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I was filling out this response form. You talked about you need a doctor, right? What was it you said about the doctor and the mission?
There are times that we need medical teams to come over. And so when we're putting together groups, it was an example I was using, to be able to get a full medical team in place, we'll need a pharmacist or a doctor or a few nurses or something else. And not every church is able to resource that team completely. And that's where, especially when you get into specialized ministry in certain areas or certain missions, if you can call it that, we need more than one church to be able to resource, to be able to send that team.
And would it just, I mean, like doctor, dentist, nursing, all that kind of stuff?
Exactly. And that's very helpful for us when we're church planting in certain areas.
So those champion church leaders, I'll be networked with, and JJ might call me and say, it's time I need doctors. Well, I've got relationship with all the champion church leaders. They're going to know what's going on in their cohorts. It's easy to get that information out to find the resource that we might need, rather than, man, I don't know what our churches are doing. We've got this built-in network already that we can go find the specifics that we need and get acting much quicker in situations like that. Yes, sir.
So, in our situation, we have the missions committee, missions chair.
Mm-hmm.
Is it best for me as the lead pastor to make contact with you and kind of work with you and pass things along, or is it best to say, hey, Becky,
You're the leader of your church. You do what you think is best. But if you want to make the handoff and then we start working together, if you want to be a part of the process at the beginning to make sure I'm not some crazy guy trying to do something weird in your church, I understand that. But you do what you think is best. But I'm happy to start making that direct conversation.
what works best?
I just want the contact. However I can get in the door to start helping folks, however that works. If it's we start with coffee and figuring things out or we go straight to that, I'm good either way, brother.
Okay.
Whatever you think is best.
Sure.
But I'm happy to talk straight with your volunteers that you send my way. Yes, Jim.
It's kind of cool as we as Converge missionaries travel around and speak to churches. The guy who did the water project, or is going to do the water project in Togo, I'm not sure that the senior pastor even knew or made that connection. He knew that what the guy does because he does that professionally in Washington State. But he never made the connection. Oh, maybe that professional resource could be useful on one of our mission fields. So maybe it'd be good for senior pastors and mission pastors and mission chair people to have a time in the congregation to say, let's get together and talk about what resources we have in this congregation or in this lead group, on the lead team. What are the resources that we have that we can offer to some of our mission fields? And I might maybe help or contact Jimmy and say, what kind of things do you know that might be needed in Togo or in Gembu in Nigeria or some other field? What kind of things could you use right now?
And if I don't know, I will find out. Like when you get in the conversation, that gives us the opportunity. I've got, connections in my ears to the ground, maybe a little closer than yours is, at times when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to do that, and we'll go find the answer with whatever we need. Yes?
When you develop a team, don't forget the people who are actually in the place you're serving. Because, every time you have people come over and build a house or do whatever, you are taking away from somebody's livelihood.
Sure.
So whenever you build a team like that, that needs to be in the foreground for thought of your team, and then to say, okay, we need to put X amount of money into this project so that we can hire local
Sure.
people.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And there are definitely ways that short-term teams can go and hurt by helping, and we understand that. My default position and the way I train teams is we never go with our own agenda. We go with the missionary's agenda. What he says and she says that we do is what we do. And if he says we need to build a house, and this is how we're going to do it, I trust that guy because he's on the ground. He lives there all the time. He knows the people. He knows the financial situation. He knows if that's the right call or not. And he might say, yeah, we need to hire locals, whatever. I trust the missionary on the ground to make that decision because they're the expert as far as I'm concerned. Our teams go to serve. And if we go with our own agenda, if we go with, well, this is what we're going to do because these are the people we have on the team, or because our church has this type of focus, so if we don't do this in country, then we're not going to go back with good reporting and that kind of stuff. Forget that noise. We go and we work with the missionary's agenda, what they need best and how we serve them. Yes.
Do these
I'll come back.
Regions that you have here as these initiatives represent these least reached people groups?
Yes. Every one of those is focused on a least reached people group or groups of people in those areas. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, I can't speak for all of them, but I know in ours, in the 6 Degree Initiative right now, we're already targeting 4, which would be within that initiative. So we actually have a couple million people that would be involved in that. And so within an initiative, we're seeing projects that are either in place or being developed. And those projects they could have 10, 15, 20 missionaries, and they could be a pretty substantial project to reach major cities or people groups within that initiative. But for one reason or another, those initiatives have been grouped together because they do work in place and they are helpful with each other. And so that's why it's been a focus for that. But I would say we're all evaluating our ministries to make sure that we prioritize least reached people groups.
Yeah, as we're really starting to develop our mission teams, do you have teams that we can tag along with?
Yes. If we know what's going on, and that's part of this, if we're developing our Champion Church network and we're having those conversations, we're going to start to create a better database of what's going on and where our people are going, so that if you do have someone in your church that pops up and says, God's got, the church I was at before was about Africa, and what do you have in Africa? Well, we don't have anything. We're focused on Japan. But, so we can have those conversations. But yeah, we would love to help place people around and move stuff around like that. For sure.
And I would say from our end, it's absolutely as helpful for us on the field as it is for the churches here in the U.S. And I think of the day, and this is just very specific to our location, had a tractor and for some reason could not get the thing to start, and we did everything we possibly could do on it. And I'm not mechanical, and I picked up my cell phone and I called a guy in Central Florida who's a firefighter, and he walked me through that tractor like he knew the back of his hand. And he had told me once along the way that he knew tractors, and he was the only guy I could think of, and there's nobody in my community anywhere around that could have fixed it. And so things like that are extremely helpful for me to be able to say, hey, do you know anybody that can? Because they most likely would love to help. They just don't know that somewhere on the other side of the world, their skill set is extremely valuable in this initiative and in this gospel work.
Maybe a couple more?
Do we have time to hear a little bit more about these initiatives in Africa?
Sure. Please.
We know a little about the 6 Degree, but what about the full V and the...
So JJ's going to know something, and Jim Black right here is our international leader. You want to share about that, Jim, real quick?
The full-day and roll-up initiatives are still more, we're thinking about those, because we can't say we have an initiative for those until we have an initiative leader.
Okay.
Because you have to have a leader before you can have an initiative. But we have one couple working among the Wolof in Senegal, and we have three couples working among the Fulbeig in Cameroon right now. And so if you had somebody who wanted to connect with either of those two people groups, we could connect you with either in Senegal or Cameroon. Not
Yeah, some of these things are, the whole restructuring is still a little bit in its infancy stage, maybe toddler stage. And so there's some pieces still falling together. Yeah. Something else? All right. Well, I guess we'll pray and dismiss. I have a couple prayer cards up here if somebody wants that. There's a brochure that tells a little bit more about the church mobilization specialist stuff that's out there. My card is up here if you'd like to grab one of those too. But other than that, let's pray and be dismissed.